I'm pretty jacked about our panel discussion because it's always a hot button. There's always this tug of war between costs and value to the user. The users want features and the bean counters want to drive down costs. All right. So, without any further ado, I would like to ask each of our panelists to take a few seconds, introduce themselves, and tell me what a typical day looks like for you and your organization. And that'll give us a beginning context, and it also gets me off the hook of trying to pronounce everyone's name incorrectly.
Thanks, Bryce. Good afternoon. My name is Liam Tender, and I am Senior Director of R&D in a company called Dexcom. Dexcom develop a continuous glucose monitoring product, a diabetes care product. It's kind of the next CGM, as the acronym is known, is the next generation of standard of care after finger sticks. So relatively new technology. It's probably been around only since the turn of the century, available to customers, and only recently in the last few years has it become widespread used by type 1 diabetics. So right now our industry is transitioning from being kind of early adopters in a niche product into general acceptance in the marketplace and being prescribed by endocrinologists and doctors. So we have some interesting challenges there with a different market shift. So I'm in charge of the parts that involve hardware and software in my organization, and do engineering every day. This morning's problem was a line down due to some software problem in manufacturing, so I was on the phone early this morning dealing with that. So that's it.
Thank you. Krista.
Good afternoon. My name is Cristo Carrera. I'm an R&D engineer at Quest Medical. We are based in Dallas, Texas. We have several products. Major product, which I'm mostly involved with, is a pump that's used to deliver blood and drugs to the heart during open heart surgery. It cools the blood, delivers potassium, stops the heart, re-stops it in regular intervals, and then restarts it at the end of the surgery. And we've had this product for 16 years, actually more than that, and we're excited about our latest generation, which is just about to be approved in the FDA. It's pending approval. And shameless advertisement here, we're finalists at the FDA Awards this evening, so please stop by and watch me give my acceptance speech.
All right, do you have any free booze at your booth? That's what we really want to know.
We do not have a booth, sorry.
Oh, all right. We'll meet you outside in the bar across the street. Chris?
Good afternoon. It's Chris Mikowitz. I'm a principal engineer with Pew Synthes Spine. We develop all the different spine implants for degenerative conditions, help correct deformities. Background is mechanical engineering, and I've been focusing on kind of product development through my career.
Howdy. Ben Keller with Genesis Spine. Genesis Spine is a small spine shop based out of Austin, Texas. We've been in existence for about 10 years. There's 18 employees. We have about 24 510K clearances. I'm one of 3 design engineers. We have cervical implants and lumbar implants and all the instrumentation that goes with it. Some of our industry-leading implants are our cervical plate. We have only the second ever cleared standalone cervical anchor system, and a very good MIS lumbar system as well.
Great, thanks very much. So as background for our discussion, I think it'd be useful for each of you to share with the audience how you currently handle design in your organization. And specifically, with your R&D groups, do you use industrial designers? Do you use human factors engineers? Are they inside, outside consultants? And how do you integrate those skill sets into your routine for new product development? And I think this would be valuable, just again, as context for all of you to answer this question. So, Chris, you want to jump in?
So certainly a really important part of our team, right? So right from charter, we have all of these folks in ingrained in our teams. We start with usability exercises. We start with really kind of mining all their skills to kind of start developing all of our user needs and design inputs. So we treat them as a full team member in-house.
Krista?
So we do not have a human factors engineer on staff. We relied heavily, because we know our customer really well. We have several of them who are on staff. Our customer is called a perfusionist who runs all the pumps during open heart surgery. And we have several of them on staff, and we conducted so many focus groups. We really spent a lot of time and money up front. And we've already had this product out for 16 years. So we took the time to spend time with them, get to know exactly what they wanted. We developed prototypes, we developed so many different aids to help us come up with what it is that the customer really wanted. So we spent the time internally. We didn't really engage any outside firms. We did have a human factors consultant to go over our stuff a couple of times and give us his feedback, and that helped a lot.
Great, thanks. Ben, what happens when you're joined?
So we use design teams, usually 2 to 3, sometimes more design surgeons, and they will usually tell us the need in the marketplace. I will go out there, work with them on the user requirements, and develop some of the design inputs. We'll get them prototypes in their hands, hopefully as quickly as possible, so that they can give us as much feedback that we just absorb. And then through that process, we create some of the design outputs, and we just work with them throughout the design process.
Excellent. Liam?
So at the beginning of it, we have a pretty large engineering team at this stage, probably a few hundred engineers of all different types, mechanical, electrical, software. We have an on-site UI UX team and a clinical team, so quite a lot under our roof. When a new design is started, it's generally market-driven. Marketing people put their input into it. Typically, as I said, I run the electrical and firmware organization, so we have technologies that are in development long before they end up in a product, checking out what way different things are going. So a combination of what's possible for technology, what marketing people think we need to bring to the table to compete, and also then our sales team, our commercial team, will be looking at new markets which might be more cost sensitive. We're taking into new geographies. And the final thing is we basically have a tech support line where customers call in for support on products, and we always inquire what they would like in terms of new features, what could be different in a future product. So all of those go into the kind of sausage machine and produce a set of requirements. And then we go and start really designing, drilling down industrial design, human factors, focus groups and stuff like that come out of once we know roughly where we're heading for.
Terrific. And just as a footnote for the audience, you mentioned a UX group. We were kind of joking a few minutes before the panel that human factor teams are now rebranding themselves as UX teams. So it's the same thing, but only different. Okay. I think we can all agree that good design comes from a really deep and thorough understanding of the user. And I use user in the broadest sense. It may be the end user, maybe the clinician, the people supporting the clinicians, through to the people assembling the product on the factory floor. So to do this, it means that you have to get pretty close to study their habits and their behaviors. And the toughest part is to really get at the unarticulated needs. Because I'm sure you four all know that what people say they do and how they really behave is never the same. So I would love to hear how your company approaches user insight research, and in particular, what kind of tools and techniques. Krista, you mentioned focus groups. I think it was you. But are there other techniques through the contextual inquiry exercise that you have found to be very valuable? Chris, could you share with me what happens at your organization?
So I think all of the users have to be thought about. So everything from product is leaving your facility to being delivered by maybe some sales consultants, to the surgeon, to the trash barrel in the OR. I think the instrument that we have here for the award is a good example where we had some user needs from our surgeons, and if you talk to 10 different surgeons, you might get 12 different answers. So we went out and actually saw our instruments in action in as many kind of settings, OR settings as we possibly could, and we learned so much. We took the feedback we had from our surgeon team and we matched it up with what we learned in the OR, and it was a really great exercise of kind of level setting what those user needs are, and enabled us to develop some really great kind of design input. So it's all about seeing your instruments or your implants in their natural habitat and then kind of bringing that back to those user needs for us.
Liam, how do you do it?
Well, it's a hard question. Our product is used by mainly at this stage type 1 diabetics who come in all shapes and forms. It's like the range of human beings. So, you know, parents of pediatric patients are our customers, so are Medicare patients, so are the doctors that prescribe it, and trying to get all of that input is part of what our marketing people do, and then we do human factors as well. One of the things that we've been doing recently that's kind of nice, our product now, you can display your glucose every 5 minutes on your smartphone app. And as we upload data from the smartphone app, we actually can tell, you know, people how long they wear the product for, you know, and various performance on it, which is new data that previously we just relied on people telling us how they used it. And now we actually can see, oh, you know what, that fell off after 8 days, it was supposed to be there for 10. So we get distribution and we got some metadata on that, and that's a new way of finding out how the product's actually used. So that's new data for us. We don't always know how to use it well at the moment, but we're figuring that out.
So I have a follow-up question, and just in full transparency, they had all these questions ahead of time, and this one is not on my script, all right? So, Chris, you're on the hot spot here. Going into surgeries, how do you deal with HIPAA? Are you videotaping? You know, how do you gain access? Because that has become increasingly more challenging for anyone to get in there.
So it's definitely a challenge. We work with our sales consultants, sales reps. We get all the credentialing ahead of time, so it's definitely a really big investment. So not just the investment to be there, but the travel time. But it's really kind of invaluable in the end. And going in to the surgery, you need to educate yourself a little bit. Again, talking about HIPAA, we can't take a whole lot of images, but we're certainly open to taking all the notes and kind of walking through all the procedural steps. So for us, it's a very, very valuable exercise, but we do have to acknowledge it is a humongous investment, kind of time and money to go out and see these multiple surgeries, for sure.
So I think it'd be unfair to ask any of you about how much does that stuff cost. But I can give the audience kind of a little bit of a backgrounder, since we've done a lot of that ourselves. If you took 25 to 30 surgeries in 3 different cities across the U.S. and go in with 4 cameras and do time motion study, you're looking at about $500,000 to $600,000 study. There's a lot of data, but to Chris's point earlier, going to the point of sweat is where the rubber meets the road. And people don't make stuff up in surgery. You know, you're seeing the real deal. So it is an investment, not a cost. Okay, so let's drill into the research side of it a little bit more. A common question that I'm sure everyone in this room has been either asked or heard someone ask is, how many people do we need to see to bet the new design on? You know, what is our sample size? So if we watch 10 surgeons, 20 surgeons, do we need 50 or do we need 2? For most people in the crowd, I'm sure that you're aware that the FDA has now mandated formative and summative testing. So formative is more kind of upfront testing, routine and iterative testing of different product aspects. It may be software interfaces, it may be hardware control, and then the summative test is kind of the design validation study that the manufacturers have to do. So back to you, gentlemen. I'll start with Christo. When you are talking to your KOLs or your key opinion leaders, how many do you like to have a conversation with to say, all right, we know what's happening, we're going to bet on X number of opinions?
So we focused a lot on the formative phase of development. The summative was abbreviated, and I'll tell you why later, but we really spent a lot of time and money in the formative stages, and that's what I'm being asked about by Bryce. I would say that we had 6 focus groups in a 1.5-year time frame, and there were a minimum of 10 participants in each of them. So these are huge. You cannot do this very cheaply. You're going to, pay for hotels and meals and wine and dine and all that stuff. But it's so important because you learn from one, and then it included building prototypes, prototyping software, and then you make a few changes and you go to the other. And if we ever go back and kind of did a whole summary of this whole thing, it'd be interesting to see where we started and where we ended. But we would not have gotten there if we hadn't been through that journey. So we focus a lot of time on that summative stage of human factors development. And going the size, like I said, about 10 participants and about 4 to 6 focus groups. And it didn't end there. So when we thought we had everything, we went ahead with full software development. That was a bulk of our software development after we had done all that user group stuff. And then we brought people back to the offices, again, groups of 10 to 12, and had them, and these are people already familiar with the process and everything by then. So they came back and gave us more opinion, and these changes are bound to happen. You got to be prepared. But if you do most of the work up front like we did, you will not have big changes down the line. That's the big take-home message.
So Ben, in your organization, which is a little smaller than some of the other ones, more agile, I'm curious how you approach this with a sample size.
Right, I think Christo hit it on the head. You want to fail fast. You want to learn as much as possible up front. So right away, typically 3 design surgeons per approach. So a system might be able to be implanted in a few different approaches, and we like to have surgeons that actually do that approach. So we like to have about 3 design surgeons per approach, and first stage is leaning on those 3D printed prototypes. But kind of what Chris said, the real value comes from the simulated labs, whether that's in sawbones or, more importantly for us, it's the cadaver labs. We have a cadaver lab facility at our place, and it's completely invaluable. We use it all the time, and through different stages of the design process. So when we have our first working prototype, try to get a surgeon in there to do a cadaver lab, and then later on, right before we do our 510K submission, we'll again have another surgeon come in. Usually it's try to get each one of the design surgeons to come in and do a lab. It's not easy to coordinate that, but it's definitely a good move when it happens.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, is that surgery is very hard to get into, so your second best choice is a sim lab. It's almost like the 80-20 rule, considerably less expensive too. Just as a footnote on formative and summative studies for the audience, when you are sampling users, if you have different user types, and I'll use the diabetes market as an example, you have your doctor, you have a nurse educator, and then you have the end user. Those are all distinct user types. So when you are recruiting people and running them through studies, the FDA demands that you have all unique user types represented in those groups. One thing, go ahead, Chris.
Maybe one other thought, doing all of your homework ahead of time helps all of this as well, right? So this is where really studying the existing literature can help you understand all those different users. So maybe you have your internal work instructions that call out 3, 5, 7 users, but the literature is telling you there's 12 different techniques, right? That kind of drives those users as well.
Yeah, great point. Thanks. So one of the things that I'm curious about, I think the audience is curious about, I'm of the vintage when human factors engineering and industrial design were things that were not that common in new product development. And now it's mandatory. You know, you need to be doing this stuff. It's best practices. So now we have a new line item in the budget. And I'm curious across your different organizations is how do you sell in the value of human factors engineering, working with human factor specialists and industrial designers? Because to many of your points, this is not cheap. Especially if you go through a formative study and you find what I technically call, oh shit, you didn't foresee that. And you have to do another formative study. And at 40, 50, 60 grand a crack for a formative study that was unplanned for, that really kind of wreaks havoc with the total budget. So I think it's a complicated sell-in. So Liam, I'm curious, in your organization, what is the mindset to embracing these costs, and how do you convince, quote unquote, the suits that this is a mandatory investment?
Well, I think the fact that you brought up the FDA earlier in the previous statement there, that goes a long way to do the selling. If the FDA are asking for it, you need it. So therefore, that's one thing that helps. I think in our organization, there is no need to sell for the budget and the cost. I think as a product that's used by essentially people who are healthy, they're consumers, they expect our product to work as well as their smartphone and to be as discreet as their Fitbit or whatever. We need to invest in this, in these studies, in this research, in this technology in order to make a good user experience. Where it becomes a problem for us is that sometimes we want to innovate quickly to get to market, and a lot of times multiple iterations once the company decides, let's go, there's usually a date when they want to launch, and this work has to be put in the front end, and the challenge is to do it fast enough to get good input in order to put it into the implementation phase and still meet the schedule. So I don't think budget-wise there's ever a challenge in our organization. Building the time into the schedule to do this right is a bigger challenge.
Totally agree on the timeline, because that endpoint keeps moving. There's kind of a stick theory and a string theory. You start here and you end here, but the people that I work with, it's like that endpoint never moves, and the start point may move up. Chris, what happens in your organization? What's the mindset there to these costs and the unexpected ones as well, and timeline?
So we see it as a cultural answer, right? So with the right company culture, you're doing these things because we all want to create these great products. I think we got to this point of this kind of great culture around being very, very thorough with these studies from a few mistakes, a few late projects, and a few members of R&D kind of pushing, saying, these studies, the formative, it's really, really important to our design work. And this culture's kind of grown over a few years, and it's part of chartering a project now.
Interesting. Ben, what about in your organization?
Yes, kind of like what Chris said. I think it's important that this goes back to kind of failing fast and learning up front. It's better to spend the money on these studies and instead of having a failed launch. A failed launch is going to cost a lot more money, and then you might have to resubmit because you changed the design enough that requires a new regulatory clearance, so it's better to just spend the money up front and make sure all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
So I look at it, it's an investment, not a cost. And one of the success stories that I've had in convincing companies that do not have that culture ingrained is you just ask them to identify one product that you did not launch right, it failed. And let's just take a few minutes and go back and figure out how much that costs to retool it, to run it through more testing, to relaunch it. And that is an order of magnitude more than getting it right on the front end. And it's a pretty effective way to kind of change the Excel spreadsheet around in the finance department. Great answers. Thanks, guys. I think the audience has a curiosity about the future and how it's going to impact companies like yours. In particular, I'm interested in how your own role and responsibility in new product development is going to be changing over the next 5 years when we have this big mashup. We've got the Internet of Things, everything has an app now. Even if you don't need an app, we're going to do an app for it. And voice activation, we have to have voice activation in everything that, so that when someone sneezes, you turn on a power saw, in the orthopedic surgery. So you've got the intersection of the Internet. You've got metadata, you've got self-care and remote monitoring. Robotics is coming on strong. Everyone is buying up the big guys are now in the game. They bought up smaller organizations, so now Intuitive is not the lone soldier in the robotic space. And then extending from that, telepresence and augmented reality, all of these things, it's a pretty exciting time. But it's a very challenging time to kind of wrangle all this stuff into a meaningful way. So, Crystal, I'm curious, in your company, the dialogues that are going on and how you manage through all of that, and how is it changing, the structure of your teams?
Yeah, you cannot do it all at once, so we've definitely talked about remote diagnostics. It'd be great to have a big dashboard. We were told that Boeing has this big control room and every plane that's up in the sky is up there and all the diagnostics are coming through. We would love to do that, but there's no promise of who's going to pay for it, right? So we think about that stuff. We have a plan. If there's any electronic part that we can include in the design, that's there. USB is cheap, but the software is expensive. So that's one thing where I think I would like to be spending my time in the future is this thing about remote diagnostics. We do have self-diagnostics built into our device right now. It goes through it, but it dumps the image on the screen, and you can copy it to a USB and email it to a service engineer. That part of directly in real time getting that information, we don't have that yet, but that's something we could do in the future. Data, there's a lot of talk about data. The previous generation product collected almost no data at all. This new one collects a lot of data. Some of the stuff we have to create awareness. So we created something called time to arrest. People were not really interested in how long it took to arrest the heart. They would just deliver potassium, stand back and watch it arrest, and then they'll go about doing their surgery. But we are creating an awareness and an excitement about you want to arrest the heart as quickly as possible. You put a timer there, big timer, and when the heart's arrested, they push the button and then it comes up and says, you arrested the heart. It doesn't say that, but it records the time that you arrested the heart, 30 seconds. And we believe that the sooner you arrest the heart, you're going to be having more reserves in the cells, more oxygen and energy reserves, so that they can stay arrested for a longer period of time without having to deliver more potassium. So you might be able to get through surgery with less potassium. This is all stuff we don't know yet, but we're having the tools in our product to record that, and we're going to process all that stuff. So again, we don't have all the processing already at the time of launch. We have phased it because of cost. So the data is being collected. We're encouraging our users to start using those features, and as that data comes in, we hope to present it, to write papers and present it, and get stuff out of, information out of that. And then there could be automated ways, you know, we could analyze the ECG and automatically detect this time to arrest instead of having to manually push it. There's a lot of vision, but we're going to do it in a phased approach, and I'm looking forward to that in the future.
So Ben, what's going on in your organization with all this new tech kind of pounding on your front door?
Yeah, in spine we already see the augmented reality in the form of navigated surgeries. So they overlay a simulated image of the implant or the instrument, and it's laid over the live fluoro image, so the surgeon can better predict trajectory of what he's doing, and so it's a safer surgery, better for patient because you get the sizing right. So we're already seeing that. I know my company is working with another small company that has like a Google Glass type of product, so it's a little voice activated little screen up here, and you can tell it to flip in and out of your field of view, and it can show you live fluoro, it can show you micro CT results, it can show you MRI results, and the list goes on, DEXA scans, and all this information that the surgeon can access just through voice activation. And it's not directly linked to my company, but you can see that it's the environment, it's the workplace, the OR is going to see this, and we have to adapt and be aware of the, especially as engineers, we have to kind of decipher what is snake oil and then what are actually valuable technologies to pursue.
So Chris, at your company, are you retooling the way your R&D team looks now? Or are you bringing in new disciplines that 5 years ago you never would have guessed they would have been part of the team?
Our makeup within R&D is certainly changing, right? So there's new skills coming in, people with different degrees and backgrounds and expertise, but I think it's still a cultural type of answer. So you have to find those great people, you have to build that great culture, and you can adapt to any of the new user needs or technologies that come about. I think I talk a lot about within my team, you know, I'm looking to hire the folks to replace me, right? So it's that right culture of finding those great people, and I think we can all adapt to those new user needs.
Great. Liam, what about at Dexcom? What's changing?
Yeah, my head explodes with changes at Dexcom. I mean,
there's an app for that.
Yeah, there probably is. A bunch of them. But if I go back like to 2006, right, our product was basically first time it kind of was in volume on the market, and it was all about finger stick replacement. People had to prick their finger to get their glucose, and we were going to basically stick a sensor on them that they could wear for 7 days, and they'd have a little display they carried around in their pocket that would show their data, make a decision based on it. Very simple. They change it at the end of 7 days, and it's an innovative product. So we went from that to where we are today in 2019, which is, well, you can carry around that thing in your pocket that shows you the display, or alternatively you can download an app and you can put it on your phone, right? And so now the thing you wear on your stomach talks Bluetooth to your phone, and your phone then, you can remote monitor somebody, so the phone will upload to the cloud, and the cloud will allow somebody to monitor you. So we've actually seen data that, you know, if you have 4 people monitoring you or following you, as we use in our terminology, you remain in better control, right, than if somebody's got 1 or none. So we actually had in our last featured product, someone said, can you extend that to 10 people? Like, why would you want 10 people watching what's going on? But hey, it was a request. But going back to your question about the R&D team, I mean, it used to be we had, you know, guys and gals in white coats who did sensor chemistry to make that sensor really accurate, right? That was our key thing that we needed to make sure that when you saw 100 on your dial, you knew your blood glucose was 100, right? The confidence level. We've gotten there, it's good enough. Now it's all about experience from the point of view. We're looking in the future to say, can we give people decision support? Can we look back on what they've done over the last 10 days and say, hey, you did this on Thursday, is there going to be a recommendation coming from an app? Now, it's not there today, but that's part of going forward. That's not the kind of skill set we needed 10 years ago. So we need both, but yeah, I mean, it goes back to my head's exploding with the new engineers that I see being hired, and I think, why do we need them? You know, but that's the way it's going. Our CEO recently said it's about the experience, no longer just about the sensor.
Absolutely, and I think in medical, for those of us who have been in the hospital, wasn't that fun? You know, can't you look forward to going back? Or if you have to manage a disease on a daily basis, you know, the interactions with so many of these medical devices just erode your dignity, you know, day by day by day. You know, for me, who have parents who are in their 90s, you know, try to buy something nice for them that doesn't remind them that they've got one foot in the box. You know, it is really impossible. So I think the user experience is such a potent place for all of you with your user experience teams. So we're rounding the corner into the final stretch here. I have two really easy questions. And the first question is, in your industry category, what company do you admire? And Chris, I know you opted out of this already. You know, you didn't want to say anything about anyone. So, all right, that's okay. So, Liam, who's kind of knocking out the home runs from your point of view?
I got to answer this with two, one of whom, the first one's not a competitor. I actually think in my category, the FDA, who I rarely have commendation for, have done a really good job with our technology. What they've, for the public, for the American public, they've forced us to declassify our product from a Class 3 medical device to a Class 2, lowering the bar of entry for competitors. So, you know, they pushed us in that direction last year. And I think it's good, and it's actually brought in some competition, which has forced us to be innovative, and overall the American public is benefiting from it. I think it's not often I commend them, but I think that's one. But our major competitor right now is Abbott Diabetes Care, and they're good too.
Great, thanks. Krista.
So, we do not have any competitors. It's good to be in that situation,
yeah.
right? And our space is very small. My space is literally defined by the heart-lung machine that takes care of delivery of blood to the entire body, and we take care of blood delivery to the heart. That's pretty much our space. We're excited about a company called Spectrum Medical. You might have heard of them. British-based company. They started off with just being the data guys. They just collected data and generated reports, and they have since come out with a whole heart-lung machine and a cardioplegia delivery system we hear. So we haven't seen it yet. They would be our competitors when they do come out. And their heart-lung machine is being sold in Canada, not yet being sold in the United States. And I have not seen that either. I was in Toronto for the AATS show just beginning of May, and I was expecting to see it there, but I did not. I'm going to be in Toronto General, and I hear Toronto General just bought 12 of their heart-lung machines. That's coming up next month, so maybe next time I'll have a little bit more insight. But just looking at their website, it just looks like they have a neat way to present data. Their user experience looks good. I'd love to get my hands on one of them. Check it out.
Well, being a Canuck, hopefully when you go back to Toronto, you'll be celebrating the Raptors' imminent win here. Right?
Looking forward to
that. That's right. The Warrior fans here in the crowd. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I admire the companies that, you know, trailblaze with new science. So often in these marketplaces, it's all based on reimbursement. Which products can you make the most money off of? So those products usually get pushed to the top of the list. But there are some technologies out there that need to be adopted. So one company that comes to mind is a company called NanoV. NanoV is a very small spine company like Genesis Spine, and they have tailored the titanium oxide layer on their titanium implants to accelerate osteogenesis and osseointegration into their implants. And that's pretty cool. idea that the patient's going to get a product that's going to fuse quicker and better outcome at the end of the day. The other thing they're working on are antibacterial coatings, way to apply those to a lot of their implants, and that'll be great for patients, doctors, and hospitals. So you should get some good outcomes from those two technologies.
Okay, I want to end this conversation with a question that I just love asking everyone. What is the best design product that you own? And before you answer that, I just want to give you a little context. I did a study of 100 people where you just grab them off the street. What's the best product that you own? And then, some people would say my Gucci shoes when I don't wear socks, or my 54 truck, or my watch, because when I put it on, it makes me feel like James Bond for 2 picoseconds, or my baseball cap that I haven't washed in 2 decades. So Liam, what's the best design product that you own?
Okay, let me answer differently. I have a product that I own that I really admire. So I've had this product for 10 years. 10 years ago, I went shopping for a very unglamorous and unsexy thing called a minivan. And I took around a toddler and a car seat with me shopping. And I literally would put him on the back seat, strap him in, and I was amazed at how many of these his head hit off the ceiling, right? And I couldn't lower the seat in it. So eventually, this was not an enjoyable experience. I bought a Honda Odyssey, and we've had it for 10 years. And honestly, where the cup holders are, the seats fold down, the TV that's in the back of it, and the headphones, I mean, it's not the most enjoyable drive, mind you. But I can tell you, as a product that's to do its job, it really, there's nothing beats it. For any time I want to, go get something, I don't have a pickup truck, I use this. It's a well-designed product.
Well, we did some ethnographic research in minivans, so I'll guarantee you that if you get stuck in a snowstorm, there's enough food underneath that back seat that you can live for about a week.
Yeah, I believe that. There were colonies of ants living in there one time. I don't have to worry about the snowstorm. I live in Florida. But wild bugs.
Krista, what best design product do you own?
Well, I have the obvious answer, my iPhone. So I had to think of something besides that. I think everyone would agree the iPhone is a very well-designed product.
Game changer, yeah.
Did you say aging?
No, game changer.
Oh, game changer.
No, you look young. It's okay.
Someone gifted us a Roomba a few months ago, and didn't think much of it. I'm like, nah, I can do my vacuum cleaning myself, but we've started using it, and this thing is pretty awesome. It does the job. It really picks up stuff that I didn't know existed, and it finds its way around things. It's supposed to have artificial intelligence. I don't know how intelligent it is, but it knows how to get out of a jam, and it has pretty long, good battery life. It has a good app. It's a well-designed product that we enjoy using.
Chris?
So I recently got a little bit of a lesson in user needs. So I do a bit of hiking, biking, skiing, activities that require you to carry some gear. So after about 15 years, I had to replace my backpack. I bought this new backpack. I did my research. I avoided the internet reviews. I tried out a few, talked to some friends, and on my first trip, I realized that this backpack was an absolute experience, right? So you think about a zipper, the simplest thing in the world, right? But they nailed the user needs. So I don't have to grab the zipper. There's a loop that fits my finger somehow perfectly, just to close the bag. The side holders for my water bottles, so it fits my water bottle inside perfectly, and then it fits whatever kid's water bottle I have on the other side perfectly. And there's a front pocket that fits my spikes, and the spikes don't rip anything. It's waterproof, it doesn't make a mess. And I guess I knew it was really nice, and I started using it, and I just started thinking to myself, this is what we do, right? Somebody spent a lot of time writing down all these user needs. Someone studied me somehow, and kind of provided the design for this backpack that just, everything about it is a bit of an experience, whether it's the zipper, or the cup holders, or just keeping all your gear kind of dry.
Excellent. Ben, what do you have that you're just so proud of yourself that you bought?
Well, at first I kind of gravitated towards the bike or the car answer, but I feel like there's so many things you can do to improve, like performance upgrades or aesthetic upgrades that you can do to make it better. So they're not perfect out of the package. So I have a very different answer, and I'm going to say the Glencairn glass. It's a glass made by Glencairn Crystal. If you have any whiskey or scotch drinkers, they know what I'm talking about. But it's like a tulip-based glass, and it's just perfectly balanced, nice and crystal clear, and it's just perfect out of the box. Makes every other glass that you drink whiskey out of seem like a solo cup.
I think the common thing of a great design, regardless of what you pick, someone was paying attention to each and every detail, because every detail matters. Gentlemen, thanks so much for your wisdom here and sharing out. Good luck with the MEDTECH Awards tonight, your finalists. Go knock them dead. And thanks very much, everyone, for joining us for this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Pregúntame, yo te ayudo en lo que yo pueda. Estoy aquí. Creo que a las 4 viene algo aquí.